In the year 1969, a captivating tale unfolds under the mesmerizing glow of the northern lights that grace the skies of the entire northern hemisphere. The airwaves hum with news of a notorious serial killer, ominously nicknamed the Nightingale, with a chilling preference for targeting female nurses. Amidst this eerie backdrop, a fateful incident involving a petrol truck unfolds, creating chaos in the area. The daring firefighters, led by a man named Frank, rush to the scene. Miraculously, Frank rescues a man just moments before the petrol truck erupts into a fiery explosion. The community erupts in applause for Frank's heroic actions, and he returns home to his family with a heart full of joy. Frank, a passionate baseball enthusiast, shares his life with his beautiful wife Julia, a dedicated nurse, and their energetic 6-year-old son John, affectionately called Little Chief. The night unfolds with Frank imparting bike riding wisdom to John, a heartwarming scene cut short by Julia's call for bedtime. As the night deepens, Frank gazes at the radiant northern lights, their brilliance intensified by solar winds. Mysterious signals disrupt radio stations, setting the stage for an unforeseen connection between two worlds. Fast forward to October 10, 1999, where John, now grown, witnesses his girlfriend Samantha departing from their home. Unlike his firefighting father, John has chosen a different path, becoming a police officer. A somber evening at the stadium ensues, filled with memories and reflections, coinciding with the 30th anniversary of Frank's tragic demise in the line of duty. Back at home, an unexpected discovery occurs as John's best friend Gordo and his son stumble upon an old radio in search of fishing supplies. Intrigued by this relic, John delves into its workings, leading to a surprising encounter with someone on the other end. A seemingly ordinary conversation about baseball unfolds, but John's descriptions of a match from 1969 baffle the stranger. The revelation comes abruptly. John is speaking to a version of his father, Frank, from 3 decades ago. In a parallel moment on Frank's end, domestic life is disrupted by the antics of little John. A peculiar twist occurs as a glass panel breaks, creating an identical crack in both their worlds. The following day, Frank watches the highly anticipated baseball championship, shocked to witness the match unfolding exactly as John had described. In the present, John is immersed in fieldwork, investigating the discovery of a human skeleton. Seeking information from neighbors, he stumbles upon the tragic tale of Mr. and Mrs. Shepard, whose police officer's son Jack passed away 30 years ago due to a medical incident. Despite his inquiries, John gleans nothing of significance, leaving him with more questions than answers. As night falls, John receives an unexpected visit from his mother, Julia. The impending anniversary of Frank's death weighs heavily on both their hearts, prompting a candid conversation. John expresses a longing to have known his father better, given that Frank departed when he was just a young boy. In a surreal turn of events, Frank attempts to contact John, seeking insights into the baseball scores and the upcoming match. John, unraveling the mystery, explains that he possesses knowledge from 30 years ago. The conversation is interrupted by Little John, affectionately referred to as Little Chief, who requests a bedtime baseball song from Frank. Perplexed by the endearing nickname, John questions Frank's identity, prompting a formal introduction as Frank Sullivan. Initially skeptical, John is taken aback as Frank reveals intricate details about himself, even citing the radio's serial number. To John's astonishment, it's the exact same radio he currently uses. As the exchange unfolds, Frank accidentally burns a tabletop, mirroring the same burn that mysteriously appears on John's end. A sense of foreboding sets in as Frank, unnerved, suspects an external observer. He sternly warns John to steer clear of his family, unaware of the extraordinary connection between father and son that transcends time. Undeterred, John is convinced he's conversing with his deceased father. Frank, furious and protective, issues a chilling warning of vengeance if John were to harm his son. In a desperate bid to prove his identity, John divulges details of Frank's death, offering a glimmer of hope for a different outcome in the tragic Buxton fire. The air hangs heavy with the weight of revelation and the uncharted territories of a connection that defies the boundaries of life and death. Frank, shaken by the revelation that his demise is imminent, grapples with denial. Determined to maintain a semblance of normalcy, he faces the next day as if nothing is awry. However, as the second game unfolds, confirming John's accurate predictions, and a fire call from Buxton echoes through the station. Frank realizes the authenticity of his otherworldly conversations. In the chaos of the fire, Frank encounters a girl trapped, confronted with two perilous paths, one engulfed by flames and the other swallowed by smoke. Initially leaning towards the seemingly safer option, he heeds John's advice and chooses the alternate path. Simultaneously, John, celebrating his father's life and death with Gordo and Satch, experiences an inexplicable surge of conflicting memories, prompting a realization that he can alter the future. Back at home, examining the family keepsakes, John observes the transformation of the article detailing his father's death. When Frank reconnects through the ham radio, father and son share a joyous conversation, urging Frank to quit smoking. Tearfully parting ways for the night, they promise to reunite on the morrow. John attempts to share the miraculous turn of events with his mother, Julia, but she's unreachable. Meanwhile, Frank, elated, visits Julia at the hospital, witnessing her intervene and correct a medication error. The patient, Mr. and Mrs. Shepard's son, links back to the same police officer who died 30 years ago from a medical incident. As John experiences restless sleep, a new memory emerges. Anxious, he contacts his mother, only to discover the number has changed. Confounded by the altered reality, John approaches his ex-girlfriend Samantha, only to find she has no recollection of him. At the station, Satch delivers a jarring revelation. The Nightingale killer's victim count has risen to 10, including John's mother, contradicting John's belief that the killings ceased 30 years ago. His boss expresses concern for Julia, deepening the enigma surrounding the altered timeline and the grim implications for John's loved ones. The fabric of reality unravels as John confronts a disconcerting and challenging new truth. Urgently, John rushes home to share with Frank the unsettling news about Julia. In saving Frank, John inadvertently altered the timeline, resulting in his mother's death a week after the current moment. The Nightingale killer, once responsible for 3 deaths, now claims 10 victims, including Julia. The gravity of the changes overwhelms Frank, sending him into hysteria. In an effort to bring clarity to the situation, John implores Frank to recount his actions on the night he was saved from the fire. Frank reveals that he visited Julia at the hospital, a departure from the original timeline where Julia would have been preoccupied with Frank's funeral arrangements. Uncertain about the trigger for Julia's demise, Frank proposes taking her away to ensure her safety. However, John, driven by his duty as a cop to prevent further killings, argues for tracing the killer and intervening before more lives are lost. Aware of the Nightingale's next targets, John advises Frank to personally investigate, cautioning against reporting a crime that has yet to occur to avoid appearing irrational. Frank heeds the advice and heads to a bar where the next victim, Carrie Reynolds, should be. Taking a different approach, Frank avoids drawing attention to himself. As a result, Carrie, sensing Frank's interest, invites him over, disrupting the Nightingale's pattern. The police files on Carrie disappear, confirming Frank's success in altering her fate. Later, Frank introduces Julia and little John to John, seizing the opportunity to exchange critical information about the next intended victim, Clark. Frank takes proactive measures, arriving early at the bar where Clark works part-time. However, a sudden assault leaves him unconscious and the killer steals his driver's license. Upon regaining consciousness, Frank realizes the killer is aware of his interference and has already murdered Clark inside her apartment. Distraught by the loss of Clark and the compromised situation, Frank confides in John, expressing a desire to abandon their intervention efforts and simply take his family away from the unfolding chaos. The weight of the ever-changing timeline and the unpredictable consequences weigh heavily on both father and son, challenging their resolve and testing the limits of their attempts to rewrite destiny. Concerned and determined, John realizes a potential breakthrough. When the Nightingale killer took Frank's ID, he likely left fingerprints on the wallet. Urgently, John instructs his father to hide the wallet where it won't be disturbed for 30 years. In a serendipitous moment, John discovers Frank's wallet in the present. Processing the fingerprints reveals a match with someone named Jack, the supposed deceased policeman's son of Mr. and Mrs. Shepard. Jack now operates a private detective agency, and John, investigating further, discovers that Jack's mother also fell victim to the Nightingale. Shockingly, Jack murdered his own mother to divert suspicion from himself. Approaching Jack in a diner, John subtly shares the Nightingale story to gauge his reactions. Accusing Jack of altering his modus operandi by killing his mother, John leaves, intent on exposing Jack's crimes. To divert attention, John instructs Frank to make an anonymous call to the police, revealing a tip about the killer's stash of victim memorabilia. Adding that Jack takes jewelry from his victims, John's communication is interrupted by Satch from the past, who invites Frank outside. In the ensuing chaos, the ham radio falls, breaking in the process. At the station, Frank, under interrogation, vehemently denies the murders, explaining his attempt to prevent them by communicating with his adult son from 30 years in the future. Satch remains skeptical, deeming Frank's claims as signs of a deteriorating mental state. In a pivotal moment, Frank hears a live baseball game broadcast, offering to prove his knowledge of the future to Satch. Left alone momentarily, Frank encounters Julia at a coffee shop where he relays the situation to her. Younger Jack attempts to sneak into the station, aiming to eliminate Frank, but is thwarted by another policeman. Witnessing the baseball game on TV, Satch realizes the truth behind Frank's claims and rushes back to the station. The intricate web of time, crime, and familial ties unravels as the characters grapple with the unfolding revelations and the race against time to stop a killer among them. Faced with the imminent threat from Jack, Frank hatches a daring plan to electrocute his assailant if he returns. As Jack loses consciousness, Frank triggers the fire alarm, taking advantage of the chaos to slip away unnoticed from the disarrayed police station. Frank heads straight to Jack's house, determined to gather evidence of his crimes. Inside, he uncovers a box brimming with jewelry belonging to Jack's victims. Jack, returning home and discovering the intrusion, fires at Frank and gives chase outside. Simultaneously, Satch and his partner arrive at Jack's house, hearing the gunshot. In a tense confrontation, Frank pulls Jack into the water, hoping to eliminate the threat. A search yields no sign of Jack's body, but the discovery of Jack's memorabilia box absolves Frank of the alleged crime. In the evening, Frank repairs the ham radio and contacts John to share the recent events. However, John reveals that something is still amiss, as Julia remains dead in his present time. Frank insists that Jack is deceased, only to be interrupted by the sudden appearance of the older Jack, who incapacitates John. Simultaneously, young Jack ambushes Frank, striking him in the head. As chaos ensues, Jack assaults Julia in her room, prompting young John to intervene. Holding the young boy hostage, Jack faces off against Frank with a shotgun. In the present, John struggles against the older Jack, who nearly strangles him. Julia's intervention distracts Jack long enough for Frank to shoot his hand, allowing him to escape. In a twist of fate, the older Jack's hand begins to vanish and the older Frank materializes to confront him. The culmination of past and present converges in a climactic showdown, where the lines between time and reality blur, and the characters grapple with the consequences of their actions. In a heartwarming conclusion, Frank and John reunite in the present, their embrace conveying a mix of relief, love, and the triumph of their shared journey. The ethereal glow of the northern lights fades gently in the background, symbolizing the resolution of their extraordinary connection through time. The movie draws to a close with a scene of pure joy and familial bonds as John engages in a spirited game of baseball. His friends and family, including the reunited Frank and Julia, join in the festivities. The laughter of his 4-year-old son, a testament to new beginnings with Samantha, echoes through the air. Concluding our exploration of frequency, how did the concept of time travel and frequency impact the emotional depth of the narrative? In what ways does the film explore the ripple effects of choices across time? Discuss in the comments and cast your vote in our poll. Which timeline or era in frequency did you find most compelling? Your participation keeps the movie magic alive. If you relish this recap, don't forget to hit subscribe and give us a thumbs up for more enchanting content. Thanks for watching.